Good afternoon. It's Diamond G. I'm back for part two here of the series Black Fathers, or so-called Black Fathers, that we left off with. And I'm gonna just jump right into it. We're gonna pick up right about where I left off now. Towards the end of the presentation on the so-called Black Fathers and the ills of our community that become grossly exaggerated and basically thrust out into the mainstream spotlight. I had made mention about the fact that the so-called black community is the only community which has its leaders chosen for them, meaning that we don't have an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, let's get together as a brain trust. We want the best and the brightest minds to be able to step out there for us and basically represent us to the fullest. For example, individuals who we have been forced to accept would be someone like Al Sharpton. We could throw him out there. Let's see. Let's throw out Louis Farrakhan. We could throw him out there. Who else? Jesse Jackson. And let's just start with that small group. And when you take a look at things on the greater scheme, they absolutely do not represent me. And, I don't know about you, but I didn't choose them. I didn't say, hey, let me get a couple of moronic individuals who can say ignorant things and also come under scrutiny because their conduct is not above board. And let's let them represent and lead us. If we start with Jesse Jackson, people might say, oh, wait a minute, what's wrong with Jesse Jackson? Are you kidding me? Jesse Jackson, the same Jesse Jackson who basically helped propagate the stereotype of black men not being able to, or so-called black men not being able to be monogamous. He fathered a child out of wedlock, then took the money from his organization and used that to hide his mistress and his child. Come on now, give me a break. And yet this guy still is right there at the forefront. He's considered one of our great leaders. If you look on CNN, anytime something happens, here they go. Here come Al Sharpton, and here comes Jesse Jackson. And we don't want to hear from you. I don't want to hear from you. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Step down, step out of the spotlight. So, again, I think that this is a direct effect of what I would call the demasculation and the humiliation and the stereotyping that we're just not worthy. So we can take anything can be thrown up there, in our stead. Okay. Now, what this leads to, let's go a little deeper here. They may say, hey, well, you know what? I don't really understand how it is that, thinking that, quote unquote, black men are not good fathers. They can't stand on their own 2 feet. They're just, basic riffraff. I don't understand how that has a greater effect on the society at whole. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to school you to that fact. All right. Now, let's start very simple. Let's start with a topic which is, a hot button, in the minority communities, particularly African American and so-called African American and even the Latino community. You ever notice how, when you look around in your neighborhood, depending on where you're at, with the exception of some small pockets, the majority of the members of law enforcement are not people of color. Now, on the surface, one might look at that and say, you know what, it's racism. It's the quote unquote the white man. It's the man, who is keeping brothers from becoming members of law enforcement and becoming cops. I say to you, that's absolutely not the case. Now, while racism absolutely exists, and of course there's an element of that, the problem is not so much the quote unquote man, or a bigoted system that's geared against us and geared to, basically keep us out of certain positions. But it's actually, I'd say it's probably the American Negro culture, itself within our community. Now, this is where we talk about how a minority of the community has a tendency to basically have an effect on the majority. Okay? Now, I'm sure that most of you came up, as you came up, you faced a lot of scrutiny. You always hear you can't trust the police, you can't, who wants to be a cop? You don't want to be a cop. Cops are crooked. Cops beat us up. It's just a bad look. So, these are some facts that are not in dispute. Even, myself, having a law enforcement background, I can't really dispute that. I've seen things on a couple of different levels with regards to that. But to me, the biggest problem that we have is the fact that in these communities that would need to see someone who looks like them the most work in the streets, there's become a culture where it's like, if you're a person of color and you go into law enforcement, you are ostracized from the so-called American Negro, black, whatever, hip hop, whatever they want to call it. You're basically crossed over to the other side. You turned your back on your quote unquote people by you taking that venture into law enforcement. Or you holding down a job, where is it, instead of you taking the quick money, I've seen brothers and sisters that, it's not exclusively for a male situation, but same thing with our young sisters of color. What happens to them? They go and they get a job at McDonald's, Burger King. Oh, they get heavily clowned and ridiculed. What are you doing? There's a better way to make that money. There's no need, you don't have to work a job. You don't have to do that. And it's such a immense amount of pressure. Again, like I said, from a small segment of the community. And unfortunately, what happens when you're in these type of situations, and usually what happens in the type of areas that these things are happening at, they are in the most depressed areas, the areas that would need to benefit the most from having people from within their own community taking jobs in there. Let's take for instance New York. Let's say we can go with Brooklyn. When I was a little cat, when my dad would take me over to go see my cousins, out in Brownsville, back then, because we're talking like the early '80s, you'd be hard pressed to find a person of color with a uniform on. However, you look around you, there's nothing but people of color in the projects over around that area. Go over into Marcy, same thing. Flatbush, that whole area, Bed-Stuy, same thing. And you just be sitting there scratching your head like, man, what in the world's happened here? But what happens is that you have a situation where the predominant theme, as don't trust the man, don't become the man, you need to just, you hang out, you can just kick it, do whatever. But, God forbid you get a real job, and you're trying to do some real good in your community, So more or less what happens is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, If you're going to constantly say, hey, we've got, an excessive amount of people who are not from our community in our community. Well, the only way to change that is by building up the people within your community to take those type of jobs. You can't open your mouth and be flapping your gums talking about, the cops from around here, they don't even live here. Well, how many of you went ahead and put that application in? How many of you as parents, have told your children, you need to go and get a career in law enforcement so you can work, down the street here, what that would do, for some of the elders that are in these communities? Think about that. It's a sense of pride. When I put my uniform on, it was a sense of pride. I'd be out, it made me feel so good, when someone would see me, whether it be a person of color or otherwise. I used to get stopped all the time. Feel like, what, young man, you look good in your uniform. You look good in your uniform. And I remember a time when, you wouldn't have been able to work, in law enforcement. You know, we're really proud of you. You know, and that came from so-called whites and, you know, so-called blacks. You know, now of course there were always the detractors. You know, the so-called American Negro. You know, I had one guy tell me, he's like, oh, you're the fuzz. Oh, you know what I'm saying, you were Jake. I'm like, my man, you know, I don't speak riddles. You know, this isn't the old Batman with the Riddler. You got something to say, you can say it straight up. You know. But again, you know, these fools, you know, they hop away and go ahead about their business. Okay? So, you know, let's stick with that theme there, right? On what else, you know, can evolve from that type of mentality. So we just not just talk about law enforcement. That's just on the surface. Let's go a step further than that. You know, let's talk about maybe an individual such as Don Lemon. Let's get on him for a minute. Now, Don Lemon, you know, he's quite a character. You know, for me, I look at him. He's a rather courageous person, simply because of the fact that he is he came out, you know, as a gay man. But not only is he gay, but he's a person of color. You know, he's highly visible. You know, and he has, you know, basically broken so many different stereotypes. Now, before, you know, anyone says, oh, you know, what do you mean? Well, you know, propping this guy up. Listen, let's be clear. What a person does in their own personal life, you know, as far as their sexual orientation, has zero to do with them as, you know, as their, you know, what they're capable of, you know, and who they are. You know, you are not in a position to judge. You know, now you may not agree with what they do, you know, but you got to remember, this person, you know, is someone's brother, you know, or it could be someone's sister, you know, someone's father. Okay, so let's just clear the air on that right now. So Don Lemon, you know, what we're going to be talking about here, the criticism that he's going to come under fire has zero to do with his sexual orientation. But let's talk about Don Lemon for a minute. You know, I watch CNN. And it's to the point now where I'm gritting my teeth, you know, through a lot of this news coverage. But one thing that was very striking to me was when President Barack Obama, who I do not agree with politically at all. You know, I take issue with a lot of the things that he's done as far as, you know, education and, you know, cutting grants and, you know, things of that nature, Obamacare. But the one thing about President Barack Obama is that I respect him because he is the President of the United States. The same way that I supported President Bush, you know, and even though I disagreed with a lot that he did, he's the leader of our country, or the so-called leader of our country. You know, so you got to give him that respect. Okay, so now I give him that respect. You know, so what ends up happening here, you know, Don Lemon, you know, he comes out and you know, he's talking on his show, you know, and they're talking about how Barack Obama is finally the quote unquote black president. I sat there, I said, well, I'll be damned. The black president? You know, well, you would have figured that, you know, simply by the color of his skin, you know, he can't escape that, you know. He's always going to be a so-called black. But what he was talking about was the fact that he said that President Barack Obama finally, openly, you know, reached out to the quote-unquote, you know, black community and embraced, you know, these young men and his initiative, you know, where he's, you know, celebrating young black men, so-called black men who are doing the right thing. You know, individuals who have worked really hard and have earned some recognition. You know, I was sitting there, you know, and I was disgusted. Okay? Now, number one, you know, for Don Lemon to even mention, you know, this whole concept of him finally becoming black, quote unquote black, to me, the black which he was referring to is an American Negro concept. Okay? It gives credence to a culture, you know, which has been dismissive, wholesalely rejects education, and also embraces ignorance, foolishness, and stupidity. Now, he should have known better. Okay, he should have known better because, like I said, I'm not alone out here. Those of us, who are, quote unquote, so-called blacks and not the American Negro. Okay, we took a look at that and we was like, oh wow, you don't think we're gonna catch that? Now, perhaps maybe it wasn't the fact that he didn't believe that we have a voice. We're not going to speak up. So let's get into what he said. He says, for the first time in his presidency, he's become the black president. These kids are from the ghetto, they're from these poor areas, and he's celebrating them. We got a news flash for you, Don Lemon. President Barack Obama, not only is this something that he's regularly done, okay, so he could not all of a sudden become the black president. He's always been a quote-unquote black president. Now the question is he in favor for the American Negro and the stupidity that they've put forth? And I would say absolutely not. Okay? All you get to do is, like, just pour over a few of President Barack Obama's speeches. When he first took office, think about this. He went after the American Negro with both guns blazing. He said, you know what? We need to stand up. We need to protect our women. Now our women doesn't necessarily mean just women of color. Okay? Our women means any woman with whom you have decided to procreate, enter into a relationship with. You got to protect them. Right? He said, stand up. Take responsibility for yourself. We are no longer at a point, where we can let those who have basically stripped everything good away from us. I'm paraphrasing here. We can no longer let them be at the front and let them go unchecked. All right. Now this was in the very beginning of his presidency, and I'm sure you can find the speech. But you got to take a look at the reaction. Oh man. Here come the NAACP. Oh, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he's coming. That was, he shouldn't have said that about them. He's attacking our black men. No, he was not attacking the black man. He was attacking the American Negro. Okay? Now, one would have to wonder, why is it that, these particular groups, Al Sharpton, we can lump him in with them, the, National Action Network and, the Rainbow Coalition. Why is it that these individuals, are so boisterous, saying, and so vocal, when it comes to these type of individuals coming under attack? What is it, that makes them step out in front and be willing to take a bullet for these people? When those of us, who are trying, literally, racing, saying it's like a double race for us. Not only are we racing against, society and the regular bigotry that comes along with it, but we're also racing against the ignorance, that's perpetrated upon us within our own so-called community. Why is it that they're out there and they're, this so quick, to try to jump out here and protect these American Negroes? Think about that. Now, I have my own ideals on that, probably cross into that at a later date. But I'm going to stick with the theme here. So, that's the first incident, or so to say, example of President Barack Obama stepping up. Excuse me. Also, throughout his presidency, he's brought young men and women, who have been doing the right thing, people of color, otherwise, he honors them, And this is not a new concept, But, with Don Lemon, he really should have been ashamed of himself. And I'm going to tell you why. This here is why it is that Don Lemon, has, for me, crossed the line. Now, being a gay, so-called black, and I don't lump him. I did not have him in the category as the American Negroes. I figure, he's educated. He knows better. You figure. But this fool decides, to basically, by him stating that, President Barack Obama is the black president, he's given credence to an American Negro notion that he had, the president has something to prove, that you've got to prove your blackness, right? So basically what he's done, he's embraced some ideals that are really peculiar to me. Number one, we know that in this subculture in which the American Negro has reveled in, that gays are bashed, belittled, treated like dirt. We also know that those who are educated within the group of so-called blacks are constantly under attack by the so-called American Negro. Okay, these are facts. All right. We also know that there is, a constant negative reinforcement of the ideals that were, lazy, shiftless, and then it gets into the whole concept of, how, dress, speak. For a while they ran with the concept of ebonics, which was ludicrous. Okay, I mean, come on, man, ebonics. Try to put that in schools. Again, they're running behind this. Okay, so Don Lemon, has reinforced these ideals. Now, what is really funny about this whole thing, let's stick with the whole concept of the American Negro and how they bash the homosexual community and the gay community, and it's become commonplace in their culture, right? Now, if you take a look at these individuals, this is why I'm always on these kids that I come across, about them wearing their pants, down around, I always say down around their ankles, but they're usually, they have their pants, I'll say mid-thigh length, right? Okay? That culture there, it has nothing to do with, they try to say it's a style, It started in the prisons, and it's because they took away their belts, so that's why their pants, were like that. Absolutely a falsehood. I'll say it again. It's a falsehood. Now I give them credit for part of it. We can say that the culture, could find its roots in jail. Okay? But as a member of law enforcement who worked in corrections, all right, and you can ask any of the other brothers and sisters, and that would, for me, that includes everybody, anyone who's got a badge, who's worn blue. We know where that came from. Okay? It's a little thing that they call catching. Okay? It's called catching. All right? What an inmate would do, an inmate would basically, they put their pants down right below their behind, so they could have their drawers on, but basically it's saying, hey, look what I got here. Okay? And what they're doing, they're trying to elicit some sort of protection. They're letting other inmates know they're available. Okay? Now, we can argue whether or not this is, this type of behavior is out of necessity, or, whatever the case may be. We could argue about that all day. I'm just simply pointing out the facts. So what happens is that these individuals, we call catching, they have their behinds hanging out to let other inmates know that they're available. That's what it is. Okay? So this ends up transcending onto the streets. So now, don't you think it's rather comical? And it's really a sad, kind of, ironic situation that these fools that are running out here, constantly popping their mouths off, talking about homo this, faggot that, and they're wearing their pants, and it's literally a situation where they're asking for another man, to plunder their goods, which is their behinds. Okay? These are the same individuals who get out in public. They're walking around like this. They come out with these hateful music, rap music that they got, that comes out, And I'm not trying to, say that rap music is any worse than any other. But I tell you what, hip hop has definitely taken a serious downturn from when I was a young buck. It's now it's just devolved into a shameful situation. I've got a couple of my cousins who are really working hard to try to turn things around. What I'm saying, it's really interesting because there's always at least a couple or a few that can turn it around. They see what's wrong with it and they have their music geared to try to bring us back up. So I got a couple of cousins who are doing that. But even them, they face scrutiny. For them attempting to do that. But I'm behind them 110%. You can believe that. But let's think about it. These jokers are running around like this, and so it's like the joke. Who's the joke on at this point? Who's the joke on? It's a constant insult, and a constant slap in the face. You could go beyond just the so-called black community, but you could also throw in the lesbian, gay, LBG. I can't think of the name of it, but it's an insult to that community as well. Okay, and for those who are members of both communities, lesbian, gay, and also happen to be minorities, they should be outraged by this. Okay, they should be outraged by this. So, again, I look at this, at what goes on and what Don Lemon did. It was propaganda. Okay, but again, it continues to take us many, many steps backwards. Okay, and I don't understand it, to be quite honest with you. It seems like it's like a fire sale on our morality, on our ethics, and on, a culture that once, stood for pride. Okay, it once stood for something. There was a time, when that little minority group that is turned into the American Negro, they actually used to be functional members of our community. You could go down, walk down the street and not have to worry about getting robbed or mugged. If you saw 4 or 5 young men sitting on a corner, right, you would see them there, and if an older woman came out, they would carry her bags for her. Okay, because our culture was still intact. Think about that. The culture was still intact. We need, to really take a look at this. And basically, what's happened since we don't have, a lot of the so-called black, and when it comes to do with fathers, the male has been so, maligned, and the so-called American Negro, has turned and basically tucked tail and beat feet, as we call it. They reveled in this ignorance. So now what's happened is that they've allowed for a wholesale assault on our children, on our women, on our political standing in this country, on our education, on our values, and it's time for a change. It's time. It really is. It's time for a change. And it's very simple. Make the decision to step out, talk to these morons. Okay, tell them like, hey, listen. Let me be clear. You're embarrassing yourself. I can understand you. A lot of us, have partaken in the ignorance at some point or another. I know I have. When I was a young buck, I participated in behavior that would be, considered part of the whole mentality or the subclass of the American Negro. But the thing was, I had some older brothers that pulled my coat to some things, and I also had parents who corrected me, when they found out what I was doing. Okay, and at that point, it's like you're no longer in a situation where you can say you didn't know any better, because once you've been, if someone's notified you of it, and you now have knowledge, now it becomes a choice. Now we go back into free will. Okay, and once you know a situation, you have a responsibility to correct it. If you're doing something wrong, you have a responsibility to correct it. All right. Now, those who would let's just say I'm going to reject it and I'm going to do me. They come up with ridiculous excuses like, "Yo, it's a cultural thing, and this is how it is to be black and this that." Come on, really? They don't have the first idea about what it is to be black, okay, or so-called black. All right. There's it's written again. It's written. But our culture is not that of which came from absolutely nothing. It's funny how you've got these so-called blacks, and then let's be clear. There's also these black racists, who make erroneous statements, and they don't think anybody's going to fact check them. One group that is notorious for that is the New Black Panther Party. They're absurd. I would gladly challenge any one of them to an open debate, any place, anywhere, any forum, and I would literally take them apart, probably another 15 minutes. Okay, they make erroneous statements like, blacks, homosexuality is a European virtue. Blacks didn't do that. What? Like, where do you come up with this stuff? I mean, that's what they'll say that out of nowhere. They've gotten on the radio and said this type of stuff. But then I stop and I think, these are morons. They're ignorant. They fail to break open books. Okay? We, like any other group, saying you want to call it a so-called race, we've been all over the world. We have been involved in some of the most heinous, heinous acts this world has seen. We have involved ourselves in slavery, for a while, especially the Moors, and you go back to them, this Kush Empire, and they conquered most of the known world, and they enslaved all of Spain and also a good part of Europe, Oh no, we're not in a situation where people of color come into this with, when I talked about before about clean hands, we've been involved in it. The Roman Empire, they were blacks, saying like what we call so-called blacks here that actually sat on the throne. You can look this stuff up. It's not a secret. It's part of history. Okay? So the ignorance, that is the American Negro, where they can just pop off their mouths and they make baseless claims. Your days are numbered. Tell you right now, your days are numbered. There are more people like me and like us out here than there are of you. Tell you that right now. We're coming. All right, we're coming. And our weapon, we don't pick up, guns, knives. Our weapon is this. It's education. Right? The same way that you've, hoodwinked, members of other communities to buy into your foolishness and you spread out amongst them, in that very same way, we've done what we've always done. We aspire to be something better. So even those who are around us from other communities, a lot of them know their stuff too. And they see you coming. All right? So I want to say thank you for tuning in, to this, for the conclusion of the Black Father. And I will see you all soon. And thank you for taking the time to, listen to what I have to say. Whether or not you agree with me, that's fine. What I'm hoping for is that we can have an open dialogue here. I want a situation where you can feel free to comment, without fear of, retribution, things of that nature. Obviously, if someone posts something just blatantly ignorant, on the page, I'm going to delete it because we don't want to hear from you. Because if you have nothing of substance to add, we don't want to hear from you. I don't want you guys to shy away for fear of political correctness. We need to have a dialogue on these situations, okay? And an open dialogue sometimes requires that people will be taken outside of their comfort zone. All right, and I'm with you. There's lots of people that I come across that I don't necessarily agree with their ideals. However, I respect them, and that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to a place where we can engage, and build, have like a cipher of knowledge in which once we get done building or having our discussion, we can still, give each other a hug, or pound, say, hey, brother, sister, I'll see you later. All right. So be good.